Hey everyone, it is July 5th, 2018, which you know what that means. It's my birthday! Okay, I know. You guys really don't care. So let's get into today's video. I don't know if it'll be the only video today, but it's definitely the only one coming this morning or early afternoon, whenever this gets out. And that is that perception is pretty much everything when it comes to investors. Now, I say this because there's a recent report out there based on a tweet from Dr. Serkin Toto from Canton Games Inc. It's a consulting company in Japan. And he put out a tweet. Now, the tweet's factual in the initial part where it says that, Nintendo stock has dropped again by 5.27% in the Tokyo Stock Exchange. That is 100% factual. You can go look that up yourself just on Google. And then he mentions in there that Nikkei, which is a very popular Japanese newspaper, thinks that it's because of a lack of new information on the game pipeline and sluggish sales of Switch, causing foreign shareholders to get rid of stock. Now, obviously, we could talk about the lack of new information on the game pipeline, and that's all fine and dandy. But the sluggish sales of Switch and people reacting negatively to that is very interesting, because we know that Nintendo's stock worldwide has just been tanking for at least a month, if not a little bit longer. And everyone's been trying to figure out why. Because reality is the Switch is doing great. There's no reason, especially in Japan, for the stock to go down based on any actual facts. In fact, if we look at the most recent Media Create sales charts, Switch was slaughtering everyone in the #1 spot, selling nearly 50,000 units, which is about what they've been selling every single week this year. And on top of it, Nintendo owns 8 of the top 10 software sales, and this is just physical only for them, with Mario Tennis Aces at #1, selling nearly 50,000 units, Minecraft at #2 at nearly 26,000, Splatoon 2 at #4 with 16,000, Mario Kart 8 nearly 11,000 at #5. Then we have Yves 8 on Switch, brand new, just came out this week, or last week I should say, 6,431 units. Kirby Star Allies at 6,000 units. Breath of the Wild at 6,000 units. Super Mario Odyssey at 5,000 units. And Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze is just 2 spots back from that at #12 at 4,557 units. So, I mean, Switch games are selling like crazy. The Switch itself is selling extremely well in Japan. And it's not just in Japan. You might think, well, it's doing well in one country, doesn't mean it's doing well everywhere, right? Well, here's some fun facts that we just found out from GameStop. So GameStop said this about Switch sales after E3. Nintendo in particular has benefited from E3 2018 when it comes to grabbing the attention of GameStop customers, as Bright informs us that Switch sales have doubled over the course of the week in the wake of Smash Bros. Deep Dive, plus ongoing enthusiasm for Pokemon. Nothing beats Nintendo's overall announcements. Super Smash Bros. Is jumping right to the top of the pre-order list. We're also seeing great reaction from Pokemon Let's Go, both SKUs. And then, of course, people are trying to get their hands on the Pokeball controller as well. Nintendo fans are definitely reacting. So reality is, Switch sales are doubling at one of the primary retailers in one of the biggest countries in the world when it comes to video game sales. The sales have been consistent in other countries as well. Sales are consistent in Japan. The sales of the games in Japan are doing phenomenally well. The sales of the games in the US are actually doing really, really well as well. So all of the facts out there are saying Switch is doing surprisingly well, considering there hasn't been a massive hitting game in the first half of this year, right? We are now into the month of July, and we have yet to have a major exclusive land beyond Kirby and Mario Tennis, and most people don't consider those major, especially compared to last year with Splatoon 2, the combination really of 4 games, Splatoon 2, Mario Kart, Zelda, and Mario. Like, yes, there were other major games as well, but those 4 games are system sellers. And there hasn't been a system seller this year, yet Switch continues to sell consistently well. I have a feeling when we see this financial report coming up, I believe at the end of July, we're going to be shocked to see how well the Switch has been selling, despite the fact there hasn't been a major hitter. Maybe it's just living off of last year's games, I don't know, but Switch is doing extremely well everywhere. But perception is that Switch is not going to be doing well for very long. The perception is that Switch doesn't have any major hitting games in the first half of this year. Perception is Nintendo didn't announce a ton of games at E3. Perception is Switch is due to fall. which makes no sense because the closer we get to Pokemon and Smash, the more and more the sales are going to be ramping up. It's going to be insane. Pokemon and Smash are going to sell more over the holidays than Switch sold last holiday with Odyssey and Xenoblade 2. I 100% guarantee that as a fact because both of those games have a chance to sell over 10 million units. So, no, that's 2 titles a month apart that have a chance to sell 10 million units each. And we're talking about, worrying about the future of Switch. We know that Fire Emblem is coming early next year. We know that it was a pretty good system seller, at least Fire Emblem Awakening was, on 3DS. So it potentially could be a nice system seller for Switch as well, even if you don't like the name. I know Three Houses sounds a little weird, but you know what? I think all Fire Emblem names sound a little weird if we're being honest. It's just what Fire Emblem is. So yeah, it's really weird to see that Nikkei, that popular magazine, is saying because of the lack of new information on the game pipeline and sluggish sales of Switch. But where are they seeing this sluggish sales of Switch? Everywhere is reporting consistently high sales for Switch. Yes, maybe they're not #1 in the MPD every single month. They technically have the #1 SKU sold every single month, whatever that means. I mean, I know what it means. It means basically Nintendo's got 2 SKUs for Switch. They have the black controller and then the neon red and blue, and the neon red and blue has been consistently the best-selling overall single hardware SKU every single month, whereas PlayStation 4's combined sales of PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro have been #1 overall. Switch has been #2 overall, and behind that's been the Xbox One, Xbox One S, and Xbox One X. So, it's very weird to see this perception when Switch has just been consistently doing well. I've never heard of a platform doing this consistently well that has a perception that it's not doing well. It's baffling. Nintendo's last financial report showed that the Switch was doing well. So why wouldn't this one? It's just I don't know what to think about this other than the fact that perception is very, very scary. There was a huge perception for a long time, and I'm gonna give a shout out to Dreamcast Guy who brought this up on Twitter. There was a huge perception for a long time that PSP does not have any games, and it's a really weird perception considering that PSP has hundreds and hundreds of fantastic games. I can say that because I played PSP. I enjoyed PSP. I know PSP partially blew up because of the hacking scene and all of the pirating, but they were pirating PSP games. And why would they be pirating PSP games if there wasn't any PSP games worth playing in the first place, right? PSP had a very, very good library, something that unfortunately fell short on Vita. We can argue about why things fell short and Sony support and the cost of the proprietary storage and how it became more of an indie machine, and that's really the only thing that propped it up, and yada, yada, yada. We could talk about all of that, but reality is the PSP had a perception of not having any games, a perception that massively helped Nintendo DS, because DS obviously had games, and no one dared breathe a word that DS did not have games. But for some reason, because PSP maybe didn't quite have the same number of games, it has no games. That was a perception that did not match up with reality, and it affected the reputation of the PSP brand, and it carried over into the PS Vita brand, and then it didn't help when things kind of fed into the perception heading in. So that's how dangerous perception can get. It can hurt you not in the here and now. Perception's not going to kill Switch sales now, but it could kill potential sales in the future when other competing products come along or when Nintendo moves on to the next generation. So it's very scary to think about it. And there's probably a perception out there, a part of this perception that Switch sales are about to tank is that PlayStation 5 and Xbox 2 or whatever Microsoft decides to call it is on the horizon, right? If we look over the crest, there those platforms are in 2 or 3 years, and a lot of companies don't think Switch is going to hold up, but that also means they misunderstand the appeal of the Switch, and that also means they misunderstand that Nintendo's likely to release a Switch revision sometime in the next 2 or 3 years as well. Nintendo did it with 3DS, they did it with DS. They've never really done it with a home console, so I suppose if you want to hold to them saying that Switch is a home console and they're going to treat it like that and not have a revision, I guess you could treat it, maybe like that, but I doubt it. Nintendo said they were planning for the system to last over 7 years. They're not doing that without a revision. Nintendo knows they're not doing that without a revision. There are things about the Switch that could easily be improved. Not only is the Tegra X2 easily available for them to do a quick upgrade, they can start to get rid of the bezel on the screen as an example. That's more of a leftover from tablets from, like, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. At this point, they can get rid of it. They could probably up the screen to 1080p if they're using the Tegra X2 because it uses less power, so there'll be more power available to power a 1080p screen if they want. Plus, they're using a more powerful chip, which can more easily keep games that are already running well on handheld, keep them running continuously well, and several other improvements they could do as well. Heck, maybe they're going to look at a future Tegra technology as well, or something in the works that NVIDIA hasn't unveiled yet because they're keeping it under wraps for Nintendo. But whatever the case is, the perception is that Switch is about to fail, and it makes just no sense that that is the perception. Perception isn't matching up with reality. So I want to throw this out there, that don't believe everything you read. Yes, Nintendo stocks are dropping like crazy. If you own Nintendo stocks, the best time to sell was when they peaked earlier this year. But right now, Nintendo stocks are tanking. And my theory is this is just a correction. I feel like that stockholders and investors overreact to things in massive measures. And my theory is that that the stock should have never peaked as high as it peaked in the first place. And what we're seeing now is a massively sharp market correction. A market correction that's probably going to lead to another biggest jump in Nintendo history of stock valuation when Pokemon comes out and Smash comes out. Like, those two games are going to make the stock skyrocket higher than it probably should skyrocket as well. The stock market is very volatile, and it's really, as much as it sucks looking at these like sharp declines for Nintendo in the face of them doing very, very well, it's something that we need to remember, that just because the stocks are tanking doesn't mean Nintendo's tanking. The perception when stocks are going down is that Nintendo is doing poorly. The reality is Nintendo is doing phenomenally well, and the stock market is just scared of them not continuing to do well for very much longer. Anyways, folks, I'm Nathaniel Rovajans from Nintendo Prime. You let me know what you think about this down in the comments below. Is perception honestly this powerful that it makes people worry? Were you worried when you saw the stocks are dropping at any point? Were you worried that maybe Nintendo sales aren't what we think they are? Or is the reality of the situation putting you at rest and being like, look, even if I agree that, you know, maybe the library is a little bit lackluster, you can't argue with the facts. Switch is selling well, Switch games are selling well, and there's no reason to be scared. Anyways, folks, I will catch you guys in the next one.